I couldn't have done it without you, Mrs. Puff. I bet you could teach anyone.
SpongeBob, I already told you, you're gonna be just fine.
Meow.
61 crimes, 7 levels. Bikini Bottom is far from a peaceful, idyllic place to live. It's home to some of the most criminal animals on Earth. We're going to move from the pettiest to some of the most unforgivable crimes ever committed in Bikini Bottom. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. 7 Deadly Sins. One of the most popular theories about SpongeBob is that each main character embodies a specific sin from these 7 deadly sins. Patrick represents sloth due to his chronic laziness, while Gary the Snail symbolizes gluttony through his overeating. Plankton epitomizes envy, obsessively coveting the Krusty Krab's success, and Mr. Krabs embodies greed, prioritizing wealth above all else. Squidward reflects wrath through his constant irritability, and Sandy personifies pride via her competitive nature and Texan bravado. SpongeBob controversially represents lust, interpreted as an excessive desire for connection rather than sexual craving. While creator Steven Hillenburg never actually confirmed this theory, the show's creative team have since acknowledged intentional character archetypes resembling moral flaws. Bikini Bottom Mysteries. The underwater world of Bikini Bottom is full of bizarre, unexplained mysteries, but one of the most notable and frankly disturbing is the idea that the characters are the result of nuclear radiation from real-world atomic tests at Bikini Atoll. In fact, the origins of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy are speculated to be connected to these tests. Some believe they may have been former Navy divers affected by the lingering radiation, giving them the extremely minimal superpowers that make them so noteworthy. It's also possible that this radiation could have given the characters the apparent ability to remove their skins in such a frankly horrific way. The Splinter. In 2008, the most disturbing episode in the history of SpongeBob SquarePants aired, The Splinter. The plot revolves around SpongeBob getting a splinter in his thumb at work and desperately trying to remove it. Should be simple, right? But the episode takes a horrifying turn pretty quickly, featuring graphic close-up images of the swollen, infected splinter that many viewers found revolting when it aired, and continue to do so today. Sadly, the episode doesn't end there. Patrick attempts to treat the splinter by hammering it further into SpongeBob's thumb and applying garbage to the wound to help it heal, causing it to become severely infected and just get more and more disgusting to look at. The episode's reliance on gross-out humor and painful imagery, particularly the pus-filled veiny splinter, has led many to consider it one of the worst and most traumatizing episodes in the series. One Course Meal. In 2010, One Course Meal aired for the first time, immediately becoming a highly controversial episode. And it's all thanks to the show's pretty horrific handling of mental health. The plot revolves around Mr. Krabs discovering Plankton's fear of whales. Figuring out that his rival has a weakness, Krabs decides to exploit it by disguising himself as his daughter Pearl, purely to terrorize Plankton. This psychological torment continues for 2 weeks, driving Plankton to the brink of suicide. And the show does not look away from that. The episode's portrayal of mental anguish, with Mr. Krabs laughing at Plankton's suicidal intentions, is so dark that both fans and critics ended up widely attacking the episode. Today, it's widely regarded as one of the worst episodes in the series, largely due to the uncharacteristically cruel behavior of Mr. Krabs. Squidward's suicide. In the early 2010s, a creepypasta called Squidward's Suicide gained immense popularity. The story revolves around a supposedly lost episode of SpongeBob SquarePants where Squidward experiences a series of increasingly disturbing events. The tale begins with Squidward practicing his clarinet and being booed at a concert. But the story takes a dark turn, featuring hyper-realistic imagery, unsettling sounds, and graphic violence. The creepypasta describes scenes of Squidward crying blood and ultimately committing suicide with a shotgun. The story also mentions the inclusion of disturbing images of mutilated dead youths. The whole thing quickly took off on the internet, inspiring many fan creations and reaction, all of them increasingly disturbing. Krabby Patty's Secret Formula. Since the very first episode of SpongeBob, the Krabby Patty secret formula has been a subject of intense speculation and numerous fan theories. While some suggest the patties contain disturbing ingredients like crab meat or whale parts, these have been thoroughly debunked. The show's creator, Stephen Hillenburg, confirmed that Krabby Patties contain no animal products. However, theories about addictive substances like sugar or even cocaine have never been fully debunked or denied. Other possibilities include a unique vegan meat substitute or simply clever marketing with no actual secret ingredient, suggesting that Krabs is just scamming everyone to make money, which sounds like something he would do. Boating school. In the boating school episode, SpongeBob repeatedly fails his boating exam despite knowing the theory perfectly. Desperate to pass, he resorts to cheating and possibly breaking the law by having Patrick feed him instructions through a hidden walkie-talkie. Throughout the series, SpongeBob's attempts to pass his boating test often result in reckless driving and destruction, if not outright injury, as in this episode. But here, not only is SpongeBob an obvious danger to himself and others, but he's also breaking a serious law by cheating on his own test. If he gets on the road and has no idea what he's doing, you better believe more people will get hurt. Suds. In the Suds episode, SpongeBob contracts a sponge-exclusive illness called the Suds, causing him to sneeze bubbles. When Sandy suggests taking him to the doctor, Patrick intervenes with a series of increasingly disturbing home remedies, plugging SpongeBob's holes with corks, causing him to inflate when sneezing. But this cure only worsens SpongeBob's condition, turning him into a giant bubble-filled ball, and one that's still sick after all of that. So Patrick escalates it by pulling his teeth, which I'm pretty sure counts as assault. Eventually, SpongeBob unleashes a sneeze in the Krusty Krab, one so powerful that it ends up totally destroying the Krusty Krab. And in case you didn't know, that's property damage. Muscle Bob Buff Pants. In the Muscle Bob Buff Pants episode, SpongeBob struggles to cope with his physical weakness and resorts to straight-up lying by purchasing inflatable anchor arms to appear muscular. It's as ridiculous as it sounds. Of course, none of this reflects who SpongeBob truly is. He's so desperate to gain acceptance or admiration that he's willing to lie and change himself, which isn't a crime in any legal way, but it's no way to live. SpongeBob's fake muscles initially impress others, but the charade ultimately backfires when Sandy enters him in an anchor tossing competition that of course goes horribly wrong. Because when it all comes down to it, there's no value in lying to others, and it just brings humiliation to SpongeBob and his friends. Nature Pants. In Nature Pants, SpongeBob makes the unsettling decision to abandon his life in Bikini Bottom to live among jellyfish. This bizarre choice stems from his daydreams at work, which in turn cause a fire incident at the Krusty Krab. Now, SpongeBob's rash decision to give up his job, home, and friends for a primitive lifestyle is disturbing in its impulsiveness alone, but then you have the damage that comes with it. His attempts to assimilate with the jellyfish just result in constant stinging and discomfort. The episode takes a dark turn when Patrick, driven by desperation, tries to capture SpongeBob like a wild animal. He insists that he's happy that he can't return to his old life, but SpongeBob's struggle with harsh wilderness conditions and isolation quickly proves the consequences of his impulsive choice. Ultimately, he realizes his mistake and returns home, where his friends welcome him back. Although, probably still a little resentful. Level 2. The homosexuality controversy. Since the early 2000s, critics, particularly conservative Christian groups, have accused SpongeBob SquarePants of promoting a homosexual or pro-gay agenda through SpongeBob's behavior and relationships. In 2005, the show's creator, Stephen Hillenburg, clarified that SpongeBob is somewhat asexual, hoping that he could save his show from getting caught up in an unnecessary and inflammatory debate, but he couldn't stop it. Despite his comments, speculation about SpongeBob's sexuality persisted, fueled by episodes like Rock-a-Bye Bivalve, where SpongeBob and Patrick raise a baby scallop together. In 2020, Nickelodeon included SpongeBob in a Pride Month tweet, reigniting the debate, but offering no clear answers either way. No Weenies Allowed. In the episode No Weenies Allowed, SpongeBob is rejected access into the ultra-exclusive and hyper-masculine Salty Spittoon, so Patrick comes up with a chaotic scheme to help SpongeBob gain entry, but Patrick gets too deep into his role. During a staged fight, Patrick briefly loses control and punches SpongeBob in the eye after being insulted, leaving him with a black eye. This totally unscripted moment of aggression ends up violating SpongeBob's physical safety. Not intentionally, of course, but the damage is done. Patrick later fakes a more aggressive and violent altercation, theatrically beating himself up while pretending SpongeBob is attacking him telepathically. This elaborate lie fools the bouncer into granting SpongeBob access to the club under false pretenses. Eventually, SpongeBob ends up in the hospital as a result of all of Patrick's schemes and chaos, confirming how dangerous the whole thing was. Patrick Man. In the Patrick Man episode, Patrick decides to become a self-proclaimed superhero, causing chaos throughout Bikini Bottom. His misguided attempts at fighting crime leads to a series of technically illegal actions or crimes. Patrick sets out and starts interrupting harmless activities, mistaking them for crimes such as stopping students from high-fiving. He falsely accuses Mrs. Puff of being a boat thief, resulting in her arrest. Patrick also interferes with Mr. Krabs' attempts to pick up $1, accusing him of theft, possibly from himself. His actions disrupt public order, invade privacy, and lead to false imprisonment. Despite his good intentions, Patrick Man's crime-fighting spree ultimately creates more problems than it solves, which is pretty much how it goes with superheroes in Bikini Bottom. I'm with Stupid. I'm with Stupid is a pretty controversial episode by SpongeBob standards, highlighting Patrick's cruel and petty behavior. When Patrick's parents arrive for a visit, he becomes anxious about appearing unintelligent. SpongeBob offers to act stupid to make Patrick look smarter, but he quickly comes to regret his offer. Patrick takes the act too far, treating SpongeBob horribly and ignoring his attempts to explain the ruse. Patrick's actions are particularly cruel as he hypocritically treats SpongeBob the same way he dislikes being treated by his parents. The episode culminates in SpongeBob's frustration and Patrick's lack of remorse. Ironically, it's revealed that the visitors aren't Patrick's real parents, making his mistreatment of SpongeBob even more pointless and mean-spirited. Valentine's Day. In the Valentine's Day episode, Patrick's actions are insanely petty and cruel. When SpongeBob's elaborate chocolate balloon gift is delayed, he offers Patrick a friendly handshake instead, only it doesn't go down well. Disappointed and enraged, Patrick goes on a destructive rampage through the Valentine's Day carnival. He destroys decorations, terrorizes other characters, and threatens violence against everyone present. It's like one long string of criminal acts and all over a very petty issue. Patrick's extreme reaction to not receiving the gift he expected shows a materialistic and selfish side to his character, which, to be fair, has always existed. But in this case, his behavior is even more disproportionate and cruel than usual, as he completely disregards SpongeBob's efforts and friendship, focusing solely on the material aspect of the holiday. Level 3. Roger Bumpus arrested. On January 15, 2016, Roger Bumpus, the voice of Squidward, was found leaning against a blue PT Cruiser stopped in the middle of the street around 11 p.m. in Burbank, California. When officers approached, Bumpus attempted to walk away and nearly fell on his face. They immediately arrested him on suspicion of drunk driving. Bumpus failed a field sobriety test, and a breath test revealed his blood alcohol content was more than double the illegal limit. He admitted to drinking and driving after leaving a Burbank bar. Bumpus was released on $15,000 bail the following morning. The incident gained public attention when reported by TMZ, but despite the arrest, Nickelodeon confirmed that Bumpus would remain on SpongeBob SquarePants. In March 2016, Bumpus reached a plea deal, pleading no contest to one DUI charge while a second charge was dismissed. Yet, Nickelodeon never saw any issue in keeping him on the show, likely because only his voice is featured. Can You Spare a Dime? The episode Can You Spare a Dime highlights the extent of Mr. Krabs' unethical and potentially criminal treatment. But this time, only one person is targeted: Squidward. The episode begins with Mr. Krabs falsely accusing Squidward of stealing his prized first dime despite having no evidence that this happened. That single act constitutes both defamation and wrongful termination, and sure, he wasn't fired, but Squidward does quit under pressure thanks to Krabs' baseless accusation, creating a hostile and unsustainable work environment. In the episode, Mr. Krabs is also shown to force his employees to remain at the Krusty Krab until he finishes counting profits, violating reasonable working hour regulations and further pushing the boundaries of labor laws. Well, if Bikini Bottom even has them. Even when Squidward becomes homeless and relies on SpongeBob's generosity, Krabs refuses to rehire him without proof of innocence. There's just one problem: the missing dime was in Krabs' pocket the whole time, which implies he was withholding Squidward's job and wages illegally. And given Krabs' long history of underpaying staff, wage theft seems to be a pretty common thing at the Krusty Krab. The Scent of Money. In The Scent of Money, Mr. Krabs discovers that Gary the snail can attract coins thanks to him chowing down on a powerful magnet. Obviously, he has a genius idea to exploit this ability for his own financial gain without ever actually asking SpongeBob or Gary if he could. For the rest of the episode, Mr. Krabs uses Gary to steal money from various locations in Bikini Bottom, including laundromats, arcades, and even unsuspecting citizens. As far as crimes go, this is textbook theft and animal abuse, as Gary is clearly in pain during the process and not consenting to the whole thing. Not a single meow. The whole time, Mr. Krabs goes to extreme lengths to keep his scheme hidden from SpongeBob, assigning him impossible tasks to keep him distracted. But eventually, SpongeBob works it out, and when SpongeBob confronts him, Krabs becomes defensive and continues his criminal activities in secret. Eventually, a wave of coins hits Mr. Krabs, leading to his downfall and resulting in him having to pay a substantial hospital bill, a fitting punishment for his greed and illegal actions. Sailor Mouth. The episode Sailor Mouth is very different from your usual episode of SpongeBob, and it's all because of just how foul-mouthed it is. In the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick discover a bad word graffitied on the Krusty Krab dumpster and misinterpret it as a sentence enhancer for sophisticated speech. In fact, it's most likely either a very strong curse word or a straight-up slur. It's hard to tell, but they go on to use it in basically every single situation, no matter how inappropriate. The pair irresponsibly uses the word inside the Krusty Krab, including over their restaurant's intercom system, causing all the restaurant's customers to flee in disgust and offense. Of course, this disrupts business and violates Mr. Krabs' explicit prohibition against the 13 bad words sailors use, one of the only rules he imposes strictly. But despite Mr. Krabs' warning, SpongeBob later blurts the word during a game of eels and escalators, causing a chaotic chase as Patrick attempts to report him for his crime. Both of them accidentally utter the word again during their tattling sprint to the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs eventually forces them to repaint the Krusty Krab as punishment, only to hypocritically scream all 13 banned words after stubbing his toe. Turns out that even authority figures do the very thing they tell others not to do. Just One Bite. In Just One Bite, SpongeBob discovers Squidward has never actually tried a Krabby Patty, so of course SpongeBob does everything he can to convince him to try one. After much persistence from SpongeBob, Squidward tries one and insists he hates it, but in reality, Squidward is hooked and feeding his addiction without letting SpongeBob know about it. But the episode originally contained a scene where Squidward triggers a security system at the Krusty Krab, resulting in him being doused with gasoline and set on fire. Twice. The scene was removed shortly after the initial airing on October 2001, with reports of its deletion coming out as early as January 2nd, 2002, 2 months later. While initially thought to be related to the 9/11 attacks or concerns about children imitating dangerous behaviors, it was later confirmed by the showrunner Vincent Waller that the removal was due to Nickelodeon standards and practices issues with a gag involving gasoline and matches. At least that's the story they're sticking to. Texas deleted scene. The episode Texas focuses on Sandy Cheeks feeling homesick for her native state. When Sandy decides to leave Bikini Bottom and return to Texas, SpongeBob and Patrick attempt to cheer her up by bringing Texas to her. They organize a Texas-themed party at the Krusty Krab and lure Sandy to the party by insulting Texas. But of course, that just angers her more and more. But one notable scene, known as Sweatin' It, was cut from the episode and has gone on to become a major point of fascination for fans. Nobody has any idea why the scene got cut, but it's assumed that it was probably removed for time constraints or possibly due to concerns about its intensity. Either way, the scene would have pushed SpongeBob to his absolute breaking point, far beyond anything we had ever seen. Spongebob in Chabahar. Spongebob in Chabahar is a 2018 Iranian animated short film serving as a sequel to the bootleg movie Spongebob in Tehran. These movies were not in any way approved by anybody related to SpongeBob SquarePants, but used the characters throughout. The movie features SpongeBob and his friends in a series of adventures set in the Iranian port city of Chabahar, and it's far from the only one. In fact, the film is part of a series of unlicensed SpongeBob adaptations produced in Iran, which also includes SpongeBob in Tehran and Bobby and Bobo in Iran, Save the Sybil Gold. Like those other movies, SpongeBob in Chabahar is known for its low-quality animation, bizarre plot elements, and unauthorized use of copyrighted material, yet the film has gained quite an audience and fan base for its strange nature and questionable production values. It's terrible, but they love it. Level 4. Bucket Sweet Bucket. In the episode Bucket Sweet Bucket, Plankton once again launches a series of criminal acts to further his ongoing quest to steal the Krabby Patty formula. After Karen points out the Chum Bucket's dilapidated state, Plankton does everything he can to manipulate SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward into renovating his restaurant under false pretenses, exploiting their naivete with totally made-up sob stories. While they're distracted with that, he attempts his epic burglary at the Krusty Krab, squeezing into Mr. Krabs' safe, only to find a decoy to-do list instead of the formula. His criminal plan, once again, has failed miserably. But Plankton's scheme escalates as SpongeBob and Patrick unknowingly dismantle the Krusty Krab to remodel the Chum Bucket, indirectly enabling Plankton's sabotage and leaving a major calling card. But even though his plan fails when Mr. Krabs reveals he carried the real formula with him during a vacation, the episode underscores Plankton's trademark unethical tactics, and it reminds him of why he's such a formidable antagonist: his mastery of psychological manipulation and physical break-ins. Unfortunately, he forgot the golden rule: don't ever involve SpongeBob if you want to succeed. The algae's always greener. In the episode The Algae's Always Greener, Plankton employs some highly unethical methods to seize control of the Krusty Krab. His primary crime involves identifying theft through a life-swapping machine, taking over the life of an alternate universe Mr. Krabs in every sense. Now, in case it isn't super obvious, that's effectively an act of fraud, a very serious crime. Once in power, Plankton steals Krabby Patties under the pretext of a bun inspection, which actually is a pretty good idea, even if he's exploiting his authority for his own purposes. But then he takes it further. He starts manipulating the workplace roles and dynamics, promoting SpongeBob to cashier and demoting Squidward to fry cook, decisions that cause total chaos and degrade the service quality of the restaurant. Not only has he taken Krabs' life, now he's screwing it all up. When Krabs, now in Plankton's former role, attempts to reclaim the Krabby Patty formula, Plankton enlists SpongeBob to stop him, manipulating and weaponizing SpongeBob's naivete to maintain his control over the situation, but it's no good. Overwhelmed by the consequences of his actions, Plankton ultimately abandons his stolen life, reverts to the Chum Bucket, and leaving behind a trail of corporate sabotage. Turns out it's easier to be a loser like him than to be Mr. Krabs for even a day. Plankton's Army. In the episode Plankton's Army, Plankton escalates his criminal enterprises by orchestrating a coordinated assault on the Krusty Krab to steal the Krabby Patty formula, with one hefty twist. On the 25th anniversary of his first failed attempt, Plankton deploys a robot decoy to infiltrate the restaurant and hides inside a dollar bill. An ingenious little plan, as expected from Plankton, but when he fails, he recruits his entire extended family under false pretenses, only to discover they're all country bumpkins. With no other option, he manipulates them into forming an invasive mob to storm the Krusty Krab, which, under our laws, would be conspiracy and organized robbery, and also terrifying. During the siege, Plankton's army traps Mr. Krabs and Squidward in a toilet and cracks a safe believed to contain the formula. By the way, trapping someone in a toilet? Forced imprisonment. Yeah, just adding to the charges at this point. Even though the recipe is revealed to be a decoy, which lists 4 heaping pounds of freshly ground plankton, his actions, which also include extortion and destruction of property if you want me to be really thorough, culminate in one of his most audacious schemes, and another one of his failures. Plankton's Pet. In the episode Plankton's Pet, Plankton once again commits several offenses while attempting to steal the Krabby Patty formula. After adopting a pet amoeba named Spot, Plankton trains him to infiltrate the Krusty Krab and retrieve a Krabby Patty on his behalf. You're probably thinking that he's learned his lesson, but no, that's a clear act of theft by proxy. But good for him for trying to find a unique new approach. Spot successfully brings back the patty, but immediately devours it before Plankton can do anything with it. In a fit of rage, Plankton punishes him by tying him to a pole, a textbook act of animal cruelty. But Spot is way smarter than Plankton and escapes almost immediately, leading to a chaotic pursuit where Plankton and SpongeBob accidentally release dangerous shelter animals like guardworms and sea urchins into public areas, a major threat to community safety. And as if all of this wasn't enough, Plankton also tries to steal the formula using a baby disguise, which is not only illegal, but just kinda weird. Naked Squidward. The episode Plankton once had an additional scene no longer in the episode. That scene included a very naked Squidward. But even though this particular scene was removed, Squidward has appeared naked in other episodes of the series. The decision to delete this scene may have been influenced by the fact that Plankton was one of the earliest episodes and the creators were still experimenting with the show's content and boundaries. Level 5. The Spongebob Lost Episode. In 2003, a commercial aired on Nickelodeon promoting the lost episode of SpongeBob SquarePants titled The Sponge Who Could Fly, but the episode was never actually lost. In fact, the whole thing was part of a bigger marketing campaign cooked up with Burger King, which was selling some toys and coincided with the event. The crime wasn't in the show, it was the show. The episode itself featured SpongeBob's attempts to fly with jellyfish, eventually succeeding by using a hairdryer in his pants. Honestly, it's a pretty typical SpongeBob episode, but the false marketing was a big disappointment to those who truly thought they were going to see something special. In actuality, the episode always existed and continues to be available for anyone to watch. The Camping Episode. The Camping Episode sends SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward into the wilderness for a fun adventure in the wild, or at least that's what they want to achieve. Unfortunately, Squidward turns out to be one of the most reckless wilderness campers imaginable. Despite being warned repeatedly, Squidward intentionally provokes a sea bear by screeching like a chimp, wearing a goofy sombrero, and playing his clarinet poorly, all knowingly violating the clear safety guidelines established by SpongeBob and Patrick. Is that an illegal act? Not necessarily. But this total disregard for danger borders on reckless endangerment, especially after SpongeBob and Patrick present their admittedly questionable tabloid evidence of the sea bear's existence. Although, to be fair to Squidward, SpongeBob and Patrick arguably enable the situation by taunting him with passive-aggressive remarks about soft city folk, luring him into the whole camping thing in the first place. Eventually, the two of them create an anti-sea bear circle, but their failure to physically stop Squidward's self-destructive antics is total negligence on their part. Eventually, the sea bear arrives and attacks Squidward, which I think we can all agree is probably deserved. Chocolate with Nuts. The episode Chocolate with Nuts follows SpongeBob and Patrick's latest business venture, selling chocolate bars. Not a bad idea, but it quickly spirals into a series of unethical and legally questionable acts in pursuit of success. Initially motivated by Squidward's fancy living digest, the two of them engage in false advertising by making up wild, outlandish claims about their product. They tell customers that the chocolate grants immortality when rubbed on the skin, which is obviously totally false. But then their tactics escalate from slight bending of the truth to straight-up fraud, as they dress in bandages to fake injuries, manipulating customers' sympathy to boost sales. And it would work if it wasn't for their own stupidity. SpongeBob and Patrick repeatedly fall victim to a con artist posing as a disabled seller, unwittingly repurchasing their own chocolate and falling for the very scam they're committing themselves. And as if all of that isn't bad enough, their actions also border on harassment, like when Patrick declares love to a customer recovering from obesity, which of course is something that would not fly in the real world. Even though they ultimately profit after a deranged buyer purchases their entire inventory, their journey pretty much confirms that, given the chance, they would be just as bad as Mr. Krabs in terms of the whole greedy sales thing. The Grotesque Krabs Storyboards. The episode Jellyfish Hunter is a horrible episode for Mr. Krabs. After discovering that his customers would pay extra for one of SpongeBob's Krabby Patties with jellyfish jam, he basically forces SpongeBob to hunt every single jellyfish he can find. After SpongeBob has decimated jellyfish fields, Mr. Krabs does what any money-hungry capitalist would: he builds a factory farm to exploit the jellyfish. But the episode could have been even more disturbing. There's an infamous scene in the episode where Mr. Krabs becomes increasingly agitated and grotesque about the idea of getting more jellyfish and more money, but the finished episode holds back. The original storyboards featured even more exaggerated and unsettling close-ups of Mr. Krabs. These drawings never made it into the final episode, and that's probably because of their intense nature. The images show Mr. Krabs with bulging eyes, distorted features, and an overall more nightmarish appearance than what was ultimately shown on screen. He was being corrupted by his own crimes, and the creative team was willing to push the boundaries as far as they could to show that. Unfortunately, some ideas were simply too extreme for the target audience, and they had to be pulled back to something more bearable. Level 6. The SpongeBob SquarePants Movie. The SpongeBob SquarePants movie follows SpongeBob and Patrick as they embark on a perilous journey to save Mr. Krabs from King Neptune's wrath. But while their intentions are noble, the pair inadvertently commit several crimes along the way. One of their first offenses? Stealing a car to begin their quest, the Paddy Wagon, to be specific, so that's an act of Grand Theft Auto right off the bat. But it's quickly followed by breaking and entering when they sneak into a dive bar to retrieve their stolen vehicle. But then they escalate even further. Inside Inside the bar, they cause a public disturbance by blowing bubbles in the bathroom, potentially damaging property. As they continue their journey, SpongeBob and Patrick trespass in Shell City, a gift shop where they are captured by the Cyclops, which is actually just a human diver. Their escape from Shell City involves even more property damage when they short-circuit a heat lamp and activate the sprinkler system. But their most significant crime is probably aiding and abetting. By returning the crown to clear Mr. Krabs' name, they're unknowingly helping cover up Plankton's theft of the Krabby Patty formula. While their actions are well-intentioned, they unwittingly become accomplices in Plankton's larger scheme, which means they're his sidekicks. That's not good. Nasty Patty. In the episode Nasty Patty, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs commit a series of escalating crimes after mistakenly believing a health inspector is an imposter. Unfortunately, those crimes are very, very serious. They start by serving the inspector a Nasty Patty, a Krabby Patty laced with volcano sauce, seahorse radish, toenail clippings, toilet water, and gym socks. An act which, by the way, is for sure food tampering and attempted poisoning. Also disgusting. When the inspector chokes on a fly and collapses, they wrongly assume their tainted patty killed him and decide to hide the corpse by burying it in a remote location. Yeah, they cover up their supposed murder. Their crimes just keep building from there as they obstruct justice as much as possible, lying to police, hiding the inspector's body in the freezer, and trying to bury the health inspector alive. A panicked Mr. Krabs even shifts the blame to SpongeBob, threatening him with termination if he refuses compliance. Eventually, they almost confess to the murder, only to discover the inspector survived. Although they still face some degree of guilt for their reckless actions, obviously. They did try to cover up a suspected murder. Honestly, the real-life legal system would crush them, given their attempted murder, manslaughter, and illegal disposal of a body, but this is just a cartoon, so who cares, I guess. The Smoking Peanut. The Smoking Peanut. Two distinct crimes are committed by our beloved characters, and it's honestly debatable which one is worse. SpongeBob's crime is initially presented as the central conflict. He throws a peanut at Clamu, the giant oyster, in an attempt to wake her up for a performance. But his peanut throw leads to Clamu's apparent distress and causes chaos throughout Bikini Bottom. SpongeBob's real crime, however, is his decision to cover up his actions and allow Patrick to be falsely accused for doing it. His own best friend. But it turns out that SpongeBob wasn't the one responsible for the chaos after all. Mr. Krabs is the real culprit. Taking advantage of the zoo's free day, Mr. Krabs steals various items, including Clamu's pearl, which turns out to be an egg. This theft is a way more serious offense, driven by Mr. Krabs' notorious greed. Eventually, he has no choice but to give it back, but he's going to pay a hefty price for his crime, just not jail time. Krabby Land. The episode Krabby Land is the perfect demonstration of Mr. Krabs' morally bankrupt and legally questionable actions in his pursuit of profit. The story revolves around Krabs constructing a hazardous and, frankly, begging for a lawsuit playground called Krabby Land to exploit children's summer vacation money. Krabs lures children with promises of a mascot, Krabby the Clown, and a fun play area. But the attraction is actually built from junkyard scrap like rusty toasters and exposed nails. He also tricks kids into signing liability waivers disguised as coloring books to avoid legal responsibility for injuries. All of this is textbook fraud, but Krabs is used to that by now. Regular behavior for him. However, the playground's design is blatantly unsafe, with hazards like a toaster rodeo and a collapsing slide. Eventually, Krabs is knowingly risking children's safety to cut costs and make money, ignoring basic safety standards. So, child endangerment on top of everything else. And then we get to the more common crimes committed by Krabs. Krabs charges exorbitant fees, $4.99 for a kid's meal, and shakes a child to check for loose change. When the kids revolt, they forcibly reclaim their money. He forces SpongeBob to entertain the children through self-harm, for example, bubble soap in the eyes, being crushed by a wrecking ball, while withholding concern or compensation. And on top of it all, the episode implies Krabs ignores zoning laws and building codes, creating a public nuisance. He eventually suffers punishment for his willingness to injure children, being force-fed lima beans. So I guess that's something. But all the other crimes? Forget about them. Life of Crime. In Life of Crime, SpongeBob and Patrick's misadventure begins when Mr. Krabs justifies borrowing items without permission as acceptable if they're returned later. Inspired by this logic, the duo take a balloon from a vendor believing they'll return it eventually, but the balloon accidentally pops, leaving them convinced they've committed theft. A crime Mr. Krabs earlier said was equal to unforgivable wrongdoing, like, I don't know, ending someone's life. Fearing lifelong imprisonment, they flee Bikini Bottom and adopt a fugitive lifestyle, camping laughing in isolation to cope with their guilt. But their paranoia escalates when Patrick accuses SpongeBob of stealing his candy bar, despite having eaten it himself, leading to a chaotic argument filled with accusations. Eventually, the two of them race to confess first at the police station, believing the one who confesses second will be going to prison. But their dramatic confession backfires when officers reveal the balloon was taken on National Free Balloon Day, absolving them of any crime whatsoever. Despite their vow to never borrow without permission again, Patrick's immediate accusation about a stolen lollipop during the end of the episode suggests, well, it's going to happen within seconds. Big Pink Loser. The episode Big Pink Loser follows Patrick Starr's bumbling attempts to earn an award, inadvertently leading to workplace chaos at the Krusty Krab. Patrick's antics breach basic professional and social norms. After being hired as a Krusty Krab employee, Patrick repeatedly eats customers' food instead of delivering it, violating workplace ethics and trust. He aggressively answers the restaurant's phone, shouting at callers, disrupting customer service, and escalating tensions in the restaurant. Eventually, Patrick realizes that he just isn't doing a good job of this whatsoever. So he looks to the master, SpongeBob. In a desperate bid to mimic SpongeBob's success, Patrick copies his friend's clothing, mannerisms, and job tasks, blurring the line between admiration and just straight-up weird obsession. Patrick's crimes are ultimately forgiven, culminating in an absurd award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else, confirming that Patrick is totally useless at everything except being useless. Jellyfishing. The episode Jellyfishing centers on SpongeBob and Patrick's misguided attempt to cheer up an injured Squidward, but it instead just highlights how truly reckless everybody is. But Patrick's attempts to teach Squidward to do it is bad. He forcefully impales a jellyfish net through Squidward's bandaged hand to firmly grasp the tool, causing unthinkable pain, and also, well, it's horrible. After enduring their antics, he captures a jellyfish and violently bangs it against the nearest surface, provoking the wrath of the queen jellyfish, which, to be fair, is justified after the obvious animal abuse he just committed. Later, when SpongeBob and Patrick gift him the captured jellyfish as an apology, Squidward releases it to attack them, laughing as they flee. The deliberate act of revenge backfires when the queen jellyfish returns to sting him again, which again, justified. While Squidward's initial accident results from his own negligence, his retaliation only escalates the situation. Patrick frequently joins SpongeBob in reckless schemes. Nobody can argue that Patrick is anything but an enthusiastic participant in SpongeBob's misadventures. In fact, he's usually the one escalating schemes into legally questionable territory. While he's not always the mastermind, Patrick is always a willing accomplice. Let's look at a few episodes for examples here. In Midlife Crustacean, Patrick suggests a panty raid to cheer at Mr. Krabs, leading the trio to attempt burglary. SpongeBob notes they score regularly, which implies recurring and frankly disturbing criminal behavior. In Driven to Tears, Patrick abuses his driver's license by recklessly speeding, ignoring traffic laws, and evading police, all actions that result in SpongeBob's wrongful arrest, for littering of all things. During the Valentine's Day episode, Patrick terrorizes Bikini Bottom with a makeshift weapon after feeling neglected, destroying property and endangering citizens for no other reason than he just really wanted attention. Patrick's actions stem from his loyalty to SpongeBob. He often joins plans without questioning their legality or effectiveness, purely because he loves his best friend and wants to support him. But his lack of foresight leads to reckless decisions, which suggests some antisocial behaviors, disregard for laws, and remorse. While SpongeBob occasionally shows guilt, Patrick almost always rationalizes their actions, once declaring, "It's not a crime if you don't get caught." Yeah, he's not a great role model. Patty Caper. The episode Patty Caper revolves around the disappearance of the secret Krabby Patty ingredient, which leads to a series of investigations and accusations, and one almighty crime by Mr. Krabs. Mr. Krabs steals the secret ingredient to avoid paying the $1.99 delivery fee, which just reaffirms his extreme cheapness and willingness to break the law for his own financial gain. But his act of theft is amplified by his own attempt to frame SpongeBob for the crime. He falsely accuses SpongeBob of stealing the ingredient and selling it to Plankton, going so far as to call the police to have SpongeBob arrested for the crime he committed. When his crimes are discovered, Mr. Krabs faces legal consequences. He is arrested and brought before Judge B. Trout, who sentences him to give away free Krabby Patties for an entire day as punishment. Feels like he should have been punished more, but okay. The Krabby Chronicle. In the episode The Krabby Chronicle, Mr. Krabs' greed drives him to commit multiple unethical and illegal acts. To revive the Krusty Krab's dwindling business, he launches a sensationalist newspaper, The Krusty Chronicle, manipulating Spongebob into making up damaging stories about Bikini Bottom residents to boost sales. The stories include accusing Mrs. Puff of a high-speed chase, leading to the closure of her boating school, claiming Larry the Lobster was beaten by a pipsqueak, costing him his gym membership, spreading lies about Plankton's chum being made from other fish, resulting in the chum bucket shutdown, and portraying Sandy Cheeks as unintelligent, leading to the revocation of her scientific awards and achievements. But despite SpongeBob's discomfort, Mr. Krabs threatens to fire him unless he continues writing these horrific stories, a classic case of workplace coercion. SpongeBob ends up working overnight shifts without fair compensation, so add labor abuse to the mix, although Krabs always did that. After the town revolts and reclaims their money, Mr. Krabs uses the newspaper's printing press to counterfeit currency, committing financial fraud to top off everything else. Look, Krabs is a one-man criminal enterprise in this episode. Yet, despite the harm caused, Mr. Krabs faces basically no legal consequences, which is actually the most realistic thing in the episode. Mr. Krabs exploits children and employees. We know that Mr. Krabs, the owner of the Krusty Krab, has a long history of exploiting both children and his employees for financial gain. His actions often border on the criminal side and demonstrate a blatant disregard for labor laws and ethical business practices. One of the most shocking examples of Mr. Krabs exploiting children is seen in the episode Krabbyland. He creates a shoddy, unsafe playground to lure children to the Krusty Krab and scam them out of their money. Not only does he put children at risk of physical harm, but he also preys on their innocence for profit. And as for his employee exploitation, Mr. Krabs has committed numerous violations. He's forced his employees to work for 43 days straight without breaks, which is a clear violation of labor laws. He also pays his employees with fake money or makes them pay him for basic functions like breathing. In some instances, he's even used his employees as bait or as doormats. The guy is just straight up a bad boss. Actually, he's worse than that. His actions not only violate labor laws, sometimes they put his employees and customers in dangerous and potentially illegal situations. The guy should not have a business. Artist Unknown. In the episode Artist Unknown, Squidward Tentacles commits several morally questionable acts. Are they crimes? Probably not. But they're not good. The worst offense is his deliberate suppression of SpongeBob's artistic talent. Out of pure jealousy and envy, Squidward crushes SpongeBob's creativity by imposing pointless, unnecessary rules and harsh criticisms. This emotional manipulation and abuse of his position as an instructor is a clear form of psychological damage. Squidward also engages in fraud when he attempts to pass off SpongeBob's sculpture as his own work to impress art collector Monty P. Moneybags. Okay, that one could be a crime, I guess. Squidward's destructive tantrum at the end of the episode results in significant property damage to the art classroom. He destroys art supplies, sculptures, and other materials in a fit of rage, which is undoubtedly vandalism or destruction of property. Squidward's consistent narcissism and self-absorption just create a toxic environment that stifles creativity and demeans others. His violent streak makes it even more unsafe for everybody. Frankly, the guy shouldn't be anywhere near a classroom. Band Geeks. While Band Geeks is celebrated as one of the series' most iconic episodes, Squidward's actions should not be celebrated. Throughout the series, he lies to his rival, Squilliam Fancyson, about leading a professional band to secure a spot at the prestigious Bubble Bowl. But this lie escalates when he recruits untrained Bikini Bottom residents, including SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy, under false pretenses, exploiting their naivete and friendship for personal gain. Of course, it doesn't help him because they're terrible. During rehearsals, Squidward's negligence and desperation endangers everybody. He ignores safety protocols, resulting in frankly absurdly hazardous conditions. 2 flag twirlers die after spinning into a blimp, and the band's loud playing shatters windows, causing mass property damage. His failure to intervene in chaotic band fights just makes it even more obvious that he has no interest in others' well-being. I mean, he has just killed 2 people for his own ego. Squidward eventually attempts to abandon the band before the performance, claiming they died, which constitutes breach of agreement and also technically true. Basically, the lesson is that Squidward is a jerk and a psychopath. Squidward's petty revenge schemes. Squidward is constantly finding himself embroiled in petty revenge schemes that border on criminal behavior. One of Squidward's most notable criminal acts occurs in the episode Good Ol' What's-His-Name, where he resorted to theft, stealing a wallet to win a contest he has with Spongebob. This act of petty larceny is a classic case of Spongebob committing a crime to emerge victorious. Another one? In Skill Crane, Squidward's obsession led him to illegally operate construction equipment, resulting in massive property damage and the unauthorized use of a vehicle, both serious offenses. And then we get to the biggest of all. In Bubble Buddy, he nearly committed attempted murder when he tried to pop SpongeBob's bubble friend. Sure, he could claim that he didn't know Bubble Buddy was sentient, but his intent was clear. He wanted to kill the bubble. Try justifying that in court. These incidents highlight a pattern of criminal behavior driven by Squidward's frustration and desire for revenge on basically everybody that even slightly irritates him. Plankton's primary crime. For over 2 decades, Plankton has employed a vast array of illegal schemes to steal Mr. Krabs' prized secret, the Krabby Patty formula. His methods range from technological subterfuge to outright violence, often putting innocent bystanders at risk. He's resorted to breaking and entering, industrial espionage, and more to achieve his goals. But Plankton's criminal activities extend beyond mere theft. He's been known to operate the Chum Bucket as a front for various illegal operations, including the production of mind control shampoo. His willingness to exploit and manipulate others, including his own family members, just reaffirms his sociopathic tendencies. The guy has no moral limits. Despite his numerous failures, Plankton's persistence in pursuing the formula borders on pathological. His actions have repeatedly endangered the citizens of Bikini Bottom, yet he shows no remorse or inclination to reform. This unwavering commitment to crime makes Plankton the ultimate villain in Bikini Bottom, and also the most useless. Plan Z. Plankton's Plan Z in the SpongeBob SquarePants movie represents a masterclass in criminal scheming. This diabolical plot involves multiple serious offenses, showcasing Plankton's willingness to go to extreme lengths in his pursuit of the Krabby Patty formula. The plan begins with an act of grand larceny as Plankton steals King Neptune's crown, a priceless royal artifact. He then engages in framing, planting false evidence to implicate Mr. Krabs in the theft. Well, it works. This act of deception leads to the false imprisonment of Mr. Krabs, who is frozen by King Neptune as punishment and sentenced to death. Of course, SpongeBob and Patrick cannot allow that to happen. They have to save Krabs. So Plankton's crimes escalate to attempted murder as he hires Dennis, a hitman, to eliminate SpongeBob and Patrick before they can undo everything he's done. Clearly, he does not care for anything but his own power. The whole time this is going on, Plankton commits large-scale mind control and enslavement of Bikini Bottom's population through his bucket helmets. The culmination of Plan Z involves the hostile takeover of Bikini Bottom, effectively establishing a totalitarian regime. Plankton's actions constitute treason against the underwater kingdom as he usurps power and renames the city Planktopolis. In the end, Plan Z represents a comprehensive criminal enterprise encompassing theft, fraud, attempted murder, and ultimately, the subversion of an entire society. Of course, as always, Plankton loses, but it's scary how close he comes to winning. Karen's Virus. The episode Karen's Virus is another showcase of Plankton's continued disregard for ethical boundaries, even as he shifts to a more sympathetic role. While the plot centers on SpongeBob entering Karen's system to remove a destructive virus, Plankton's actions, or should I say lack thereof, just show off his self-serving tendencies. The virus's origin is never explicitly stated, but Plankton's history of reckless experimentation and poor cybersecurity measures means he probably caused or enabled the infection. In fact, Karen's compromised state leads to chaotic behavior, including her destroying the Krusty Krab in a viral haze, a direct result of Plankton's failure to maintain her systems, but also an idea he may have planted himself. Mr. Krabs confronts Plankton, demanding that he controls Karen, putting the responsibility on him. But Plankton routinely exploits Karen's capabilities for his schemes, and this episode is no exception. Karen's internal systems, meant for calculations, are repurposed into a hazardous digital landscape, endangering SpongeBob. To Plankton, Karen is a tool rather than a partner. While Plankton shows genuine concern for Karen, a rare moment of vulnerability for him, his negligence and past crimes change the episode's stakes. He never cared this much before, and he's always used her to achieve greater power. And let's be real here, he's going to continue doing that because he is incapable of learning. Plankton manipulates or kidnaps. Plankton has a long history of kidnapping and manipulation crimes throughout the series. In Plankton, he hijacked SpongeBob's brain to steal a Krabby Patty. He has also impersonated Mr. Krabs using a robotic clone and frequently manipulates SpongeBob for his own gain without even a moment of hesitation. But what about physical kidnapping? Yep, that too. In the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run, Plankton kidnaps Gary, SpongeBob's beloved pet snail, as part of another scheme. And that's before we highlight all the times he's brainwashed Bikini Bottom. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, he used mind control buckets to enslave the entire population of Bikini Bottom, establishing a dictatorship. Clearly he has much bigger ambitions than just the Krabby Patty formula. He wants to rule all of Bikini Bottom. The Great Snail Race. In the episode The Great Snail Race, SpongeBob's competitive drive leads to one of his most morally questionable acts, the total mistreatment of his pet snail, Gary. After Squidward mocks Gary as a mutt and enters his purebred snail, Snelly, in a race, SpongeBob vows to train Gary for victory. However, his methods cross into cruelty. He forces Gary to endure extreme training regimens, feeding him a revolting protein shake of nails, raw eggs, and kelp powder, exhausting him with sprints, obstacle courses, and sleepless nights. By race day, Gary is physically broken, collapsing mid-race with his shell exploding and eyes bursting. It's honestly hard to watch. The episode starkly contrasts SpongeBob's typical affectionate relationship with Gary, showing off some uncharacteristic ruthlessness. Fans often criticize the episode for portraying SpongeBob as unlikably abusive, with Gary's suffering rendered in a disturbingly literal way. However, the narrative shifts when SpongeBob realizes his wrongdoing, apologizing to Gary and acknowledging his misplaced priorities. This moment of remorse softens the episode's impact a little bit, but critics argue the damage done overshadows any redemption he could have won. The race concludes with an ironic twist as Snelly abandons victory to comfort Gary, while Patrick's pet rock, Rocky, wins by default. Squidward is humiliated, which means everything is back to normal in Bikini Bottom. Midlife Crustacean. The episode Midlife Crustacean follows Mr. Krabs as he grapples with aging and joins SpongeBob and Patrick on a big night out to recapture his youth. Their antics escalate into a panty raid, breaking into a home to steal women's underwear, which constitutes burglary and theft, and also extreme creepiness. Unbeknownst to Mr. Krabs, the trio has targeted his mother's house, leading to his humiliation and grounding. Even though it's presented in a lighthearted comedic way, the episode's portrayal of criminal activity drew a lot of criticism, with Nickelodeon removing it from rotation in 2018 and Paramount Plus in 2021, citing its inappropriate content for children. The episode was widely criticized as casually depicting invasive behavior, normalizing problematic tropes, particularly during the Me Too movement. The episode remains available on older home media releases and briefly resurfaced on Paramount Plus in 2023 due to a technical error, but Paramount has insisted it won't be seen again. Party Pooper Pants. In the episode Party Pooper Pants, SpongeBob's attempt to host a meticulously scheduled party descends into chaos. In fact, SpongeBob's party is anything but fun. He institutes a series of overbearing, crippling rules on the guests. His obsessive micromanagement borders on harassment, disrupting the party's fun and basically bullying the guests. When he gets locked out of the house, he's so desperate to re-enter that he ends up digging tunnels and breaking windows, causing damage to his own home. And then, when the cops turn up and arrest him, they abuse their own power. There's no legal basis for this charge, yet he's jailed overnight in a bunny costume, which is really a crime in itself. The whole episode is basically one big comment about the nature of authoritarianism, with SpongeBob's overbearing and unnecessary rules and the cops' total and blatant abuse of power telling us that yes, dictatorships are bad. Level 7. Patrick slacking at work. Patrick is notorious for his chronic slacking off at work. His laziness is a recurring theme throughout the series, often causing extreme frustration for his friends and coworkers when he can be bothered to get a job, that is. Patrick's work ethic, or lack thereof, is a key character trait. He constantly avoids responsibilities, misses deadlines, and shows little to no interest in contributing to team efforts. When he does manage to secure employment, it's often motivated by selfish reasons, such as getting free ice cream rather than a genuine desire to work. Not only does this affect Patrick's own productivity, but it also creates problems for those around him. His laziness can lead to increased workloads for his colleagues, missed deadlines, and a general decline in team morale. In group projects or workplace settings, Patrick's lack of effort forces others to pick up the slack, potentially causing resentment and frustration among his peers. Squidward disturbing the peace. Squidward often finds himself at the center of public disturbances in Bikini Bottom. His irritable nature and desire for solitude almost always clash with the lively atmosphere of his underwater community. Squidward's antisocial behavior manifests in various ways. He often isolates himself in his home, avoiding interaction with others and reacting negatively when his peace is disturbed. His hot-tempered personality leads to outbursts that can disrupt and frankly ruin the public order, particularly when dealing with Spongebob and Patrick's antics. In some instances, though, Squidward's actions escalate to more serious offenses. He's been involved in incidents of indecent exposure, running through Bikini Bottom naked in moments of panic. His attempts to assert his perceived artistic and intellectual superiority over others in Bikini Bottom only alienate him more from the community. He hates them and he wants them to know about it. Squidward's behavior has even led to criminal activities, including attempted murder during the Bubble Buddy incident, where he tried to pop a sentient bubble creature. His actions often result in property damage and public nuisance. Honestly, his anger at Spongebob and Patrick usually leads him to cause more problems than they do. Spongebob breaking and entering. Spongebob is usually portrayed as enthusiastically ignoring personal boundaries and invading others' spaces. One of the most common examples is SpongeBob's repeated break-ins into Squidward's home and personal life. In numerous episodes, SpongeBob enters Squidward's house uninvited, often through the windows or chimneys because he knows Squidward won't open the door. This total disregard for privacy extends to other characters as well, with SpongeBob frequently invading their personal spaces without consideration. The show has even dedicated entire episodes to this theme. In Pineapple Fever, Squidward attempts to create boundaries within SpongeBob's home to avoid his annoying behavior, but SpongeBob takes the game too seriously, leading to increasing chaos. SpongeBob's boundary crossing isn't limited to physical spaces. He often meddles in others' affairs, such as entering his friends' dreams without permission in the episode Sleepy Time. Clearly, SpongeBob has no boundaries and no respect for people's personal space. Patrick, destruction of property. Patrick frequently engages in criminal acts of destruction of property throughout the series, often without any apparent remorse or awareness of the consequences. In various episodes, Patrick's actions lead to significant property damage. For instance, in Driven to Tears, he abuses his newly acquired driver's license by breaking numerous traffic laws. But his destructive tendencies are not limited to public property. He and his family often cause damage to his friends' possessions and homes as well. One notable example is when Patrick goes on a chopping spree after learning karate from SpongeBob. He chops through doors, windows, and even an entire building, the Bargain Mart, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. In another instance, Patrick's sister Sam visits and builds an enormous sandcastle, partially burying Squidward's house in the process. Patrick's destructive behavior extends to the Krusty Krab, where he's been involved in multiple incidents of property damage. Essentially, Patrick is just one giant wrecking ball of a starfish. Squidward assault. Squidward often experiences intense frustration with his neighbors and coworkers, which occasionally manifests as physical aggression. Obviously, his primary sources of irritation are SpongeBob and Patrick, whose constant cheerfulness and incompetence disrupt Squidward's attempts at a peaceful existence all the time. But Squidward's anger issues stem from more varied issues, including his stressful work environment with a greedy boss and incompetent coworkers. It all leads to him needing to erupt in a blind fit of rage. In some episodes, Squidward's anger escalates to the point where he engages in harmful pranks or physical altercations. For instance, in Fools in April, Squidward pulls a cruel prank on SpongeBob that physically assaults him. These aggressive outbursts serve as a release for his pent-up anger and frustration, but they also make him exceptionally dangerous to be around. Plankton's attempted murder of Mr. Krabs. In the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, Plankton devises an elaborate scheme known as Plan Z to eliminate his longtime rival Mr. Krabs. While Plankton's ultimate goal is to steal the Krabby Patty secret formula, his plan involves framing Mr. Krabs for a serious crime that could lead to his execution. Yes, he really plans to eliminate Mr. Krabs. Plankton's nefarious plot begins with the theft of King Neptune's crown, which he sends to the dangerous Shell City. He then leaves a note framing Mr. Krabs for the theft, knowing that King Neptune's wrath would be swift and severe. As expected, King Neptune confronts Mr. Krabs at the newly opened Krusty Krab 2. Enraged by the alleged theft, Neptune freezes Mr. Krabs solid and threatens to execute him if his crown isn't returned within 6 days. While Mr. Krabs is incapacitated, Plankton takes advantage of the situation to steal the Krabby Patty formula. He then uses mind control helmets to enslave the citizens of Bikini Bottom, effectively taking over the town. Plankton's plan nearly succeeds, bringing Mr. Krabs to the brink of execution. However, SpongeBob and Patrick's heroic efforts to retrieve the crown ultimately foil Plankton's scheme, saving Mr. Krabs from a frozen demise. But he really was prepared to just let Mr. Krabs die.